Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Howdy ho.
Ruben Bressler.
Who you calling? No, I'm kidding. How you doing, everybody?
There can be more than one. Just saying.
It's true. Look, it's craziness in the world out there, but we're here to talk about Magic cards, all right?
You gonna walk past me without saying yee-haw? Come on.
Little yee, little haw. It's all good. We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention. Well, Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 face-down cards. Ruben?
Another entry into the Hall of Fame of usernames. Screw this in is the winner this week. Listen, some weeks we get a vast swath of entries.
It's so funny because I tend to keep watch on the spreadsheet that has all of our gift certificate codes. And usually they will have to run them through me to make sure the person hasn't won already. And it's so funny because Ruben was like, has Screw It In already won? And I was like, I think I would remember if that person had won before.
Yeah, Screw This In was the leading vote getter of, sometimes when we miss Rebecca Guay in the top artists, or we miss, certain cards in certain categories, we'll
hear about it.
We will hear about it.
Gay pride,
and this week is no different, as Screw This In writes, Evan and Ruben, I am very disappointed in you. First of all, this, my honorable mention, meets one of the criteria that Ruben looks for in a card that's worthy of a top slot, in that it's in both the Legacy and Vintage cubes, or at least has been in the cube at one point. And for a cube aficionado that Evan is, I am sure that he has included this card in his cube. Mm-hmm. Whenever someone is playing blue, casts a face-down card in Commander, cube, or Onslaught block limited, the catchphrase of, "It's a willbender until proven otherwise," is always thought of, if not spoken.
It's true.
You're not wrong.
It's always Willbender. It was definitely on my short list, and it is
mine as well.
Yeah, it's a hell of a Magic card. It was last printed in Commander 2019, just last year. It's a blue and a generic mana for a 1/2 uncommon human wizard with morph of a blue and a generic mana. You can cast this card face down as a 2/2 creature for 3 generic mana. Turn it face up anytime for its morph cost, and when Willbender is turned face up, you change the target usually removal spell, but target spell or ability with a single target. So it's the target spells or the abilities. You move around whatever you want. This card was dope and limited. It was fantastic in cube. A easy honorable mention pick for this one. This card's fantastic.
Yeah, there were a lot of Willbender fans in the YouTube comments.
Yeah. Willbender is, and it's true, it is usually Willbender until you prove otherwise. You're like, I'm going to bolt this, but I'm really just going to bolt the Willbender, aren't I? And you're like, yeah. Or you're really going to make me bolt my own creature? Yeah. That's how that works out. But nevertheless, thank you so much to Screw This In. Very unique. Please contact Erin on social media before she blocks you on all of them.
I could never block someone with that name. Come right in.
Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week. Maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Mm-hmm. So as we mine the fields of top 10 topics, we have come upon CMC 5. 5 converted mana cost. There's a few ways to look at this one. For example, I did not choose cards whose almost default mode is to not pay 5 mana for them, if that makes sense. A good example. And that's totally fine. That's totally fine. This was my criteria, and that's the fun part. So things like Root Awakening, for example. You don't really cast Root Awakening for 5 mana. You cast it for 8 mana, so you can untap all your lands. Stuff like that. So that was my personal criteria for some of the reasons as to why the cards I chose are the cards I chose.
I wasn't that particular. If it had a converted mana cost of 5 and I love it, I included it. There were over 2,400 cards to choose from, so we really had our work cut out for us. And I poured through every single one of them, and I'm really happy with my list.
My list, I really wanted to hone in on my bread and butter, which is competitive, like tournament pedigree. and beloved nature within tournaments, and I was really able to hone in on that. There are 10 total cards in Magic the Gathering history that have been banned and restricted in at least one format. There are 40 cards with converted mana cost 5 that have won a Pro Tour. There are something like 25 cards in the cube, maybe closer to 30, with converted mana cost 5, and 13 total cards with converted mana cost 5 that have won a Pro Tour and are in the cube. So my list is made up of, and there's no crossover between the banned cards and cards that are in the cube and have won a Pro Tour, which I thought was interesting. So my top 10 is a shortened version of that, of 10 of those 23 cards.
Well, isn't this going to be super interesting? We have very few hires and sames this week. So let's keep rocking here with our number 10. Ruben, what's your number 10?
My number 10 is one of those cards that is in the MTGO cube, and also it won a Pro Tour, although it was a one of in Julian Neuton's slide deck.
Counts.
So it still counts. It also was in Rob Doherty's Pro Tour DC 1999 limited deck. So, and that's two different sets, two different printings. The first one is Destiny, the second one 8th edition. It's also a card that is a terror in cube. My number 10 is Plow Under.
Oh my god, this card.
Plow Under is 3 colorless green for a sorcery originally printed in Urza's Destiny. Put 2 target lands on top of their owner's libraries. Man, they just don't make them like they used to, do they?
You don't want them to make it like they used to.
What a miserable card this is.
This feels like a blue card.
They printed this in standard with Eternal Witness. How dare they? How dare?
So you would Plow Under, play Witness to get it back, slide the Witness, etc., etc., etc.
Thank God the philosophy of, could we stop messing with other people's mana and stop denying them land drops, stop messing up with their draw steps. Like, Narset is about as far as you want to get with the draw step thing, but no longer is there Stone Rains, no longer is there Plow Unders, no longer, none of that garbage.
Well, you might get a Bramble Crush, but you're paying like 4 for it. Like,
and
you
that'll
gotta
at least destroy it.
Yeah.
Like, we're not getting Eye to Nowheres anymore.
Right. Yeah, this card is a monster, and it's one of those cards that often, if you have an advantage, you just put away the game right there. It's like,
oh yeah, my boyfriend and I have started cubing on Magic Online, and he's been locked out by Plow Under many times. Like, it's probably his least favorite card.
Jiraga Tree Speaker, Devoted Druid. There are a number of ways to get this on turn 3, even without a Soul Ring.
Oh my God.
Much less a Mana Vault.
If you can buy it back, so much the better.
Oh yeah, it just becomes absolutely crushing. Aaron, what's your number 10?
Speaking of my boyfriend, one of my favorite Twitter accounts that I enjoy following is @BrewsMTG. He writes the Ultra Budget Brews article series over at EDH Rec, and just about every day or every other day, he will post a really cheap card from like deep in Magic's history that nobody really remembers or plays with, and then he lists a couple of EDH decks that he thinks that card would be really good in. And I'll never forget, we were hanging out one morning, and my boyfriend goes, "Baby, I found a card for your Muldrotha deck." And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I feel like I've kind of done everything, tried everything. I don't really know if I have any more room. And then he showed me my number 10, and I fell immediately in love with Mist of Stagnation. So Mist of Stagnation is 3 colorless and 2 blue. It's originally printed in Judgment. It is an enchantment. It says permanents don't untap during their controller's untap steps. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player untaps a permanent for each card in their graveyard. And so if you're playing something ridiculous like Muldrotha, you're going to have a lot of things in your graveyard. And so you're going to have no problem being able to untap your things. But your opponent who's playing some fair Jazal Goldmane deck is going to have like 5 lowly permanents, and they're going to be like, and then they can't participate. If you want to be particularly nasty, you pair this with the Ashiok. Because any Muldrotha deck worth their salt should be running this. And so you get to make your graveyard bigger, exile everybody's, and then they can't do anything.
Oh my God.
Tormod's Crypt. Anything that targets opposing graveyards and doesn't mess with your own. And even a Scrabbling Clause is fine here.
So I'm and you can also be benevolent too, because you can untap a permanent. They don't necessarily have to be yours. So you can be like, all right, Well, and we all going to play nice.
Oh, that's really cool.
A little bit of storage matrix.
Yeah, because I'm going to have a really big graveyard. So after I'm done with mine, I'll be like, all right, who wants to play nice?
You got some left over. I like it.
Yeah.
Very nice.
But, Inigo Montoya pointing the sword at you. Give me what I want. I want money. I want power.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. A whopping 30 cents right now. Good and affordable.
And that Twitter account is gold. He has had so many really, really good suggestions there that I've never seen before. And so if you are somebody who enjoys playing EDH, and particularly affordable EDH, he just has good cards. There was a card, the Light from Within. I didn't know that was a thing. If you're playing white, you need to play this card. And so lots of really, really good suggestions here.
Very nice. Well, my number 10 is not cheap. Is arguably a mistake. I don't know. Wizards does weird stuff, and where a lot of times it doesn't make any sense, and you ask questions, and sometimes they'll just say things like, but it's fun, right? And you'll go, yeah, I guess. When they do things like they make Stoneforge Mystic, and then later they make Batterskull.
Oh.
Yeah. Batterskull is not a reasonable Magic card. There's nothing remotely fair about what this thing is doing, and how it interacts with Stoneforge Mystic is absolutely ridiculous. Batterskull is 5 generic mana. It is a mythic from New Phyrexia, and only reprinted as a Grand Prix promo. It is an artifact equipment with living weapon. When this equipment enters the battlefield, you put a 0/0 black germ creature token onto the battlefield and attach this to it. Equipped creature gets +4/+4 and has vigilance and lifelink. 3 generic mana, return Batterskull to its owner's hand, and you equip it for 5.
Now, this card, so Stoneforge Mystic was already a problem before New Phyrexia came out, and then they gave us Batterskull.
Yes.
Like, this was the easiest slam dunk ever.
Easiest. We already had Sword of Feast and Famine, and then this comes out in the next set.
Like, Stoneforge Mystic was already a problem. Now, also,
it was
really
nuts.
Quickly, I remember you saying at the top of this particular program that you were only going to include cards that were intended to be cast for their casting cost value.
A man makes a rule and then immediately busted on the first one.
Although, to be fair, this had seen play in like those blue-red mid-range decks in Modern, decks without Stoneforge Mystic.
Right.
This card has been seen in the past.
And it's been in plenty of sideboards and stuff,
My fondest memory of Batterskull is that right when I first started as a co-host of the In Contention podcast with Matt Cranstuber and Sam Stoddard, they had a t-shirt designed, but I wasn't on the art that had the shirt, but I had been on the show long enough that they were like, we need to finagle a way in. And so I got put in the Employee of the Month poster on the wall behind Cranny and Sam working at a fast food restaurant making deep fried battered skulls. And so that was the t-shirt design. And so that was my era of Batterskull.
Yeah, Batterskull is just a weird, crazy card. Because it's one of those. Yes, it was put in by Stoneforge Mystic. But I have played many a cube game where I just slam this for 5 mana, pay 5 more to equip it to something with evasion, and then just kill them, and then gain a bunch of life.
Is it me, or did anyone else take a long time to figure out what this is?
You mean the original printing?
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on.
I was like, what is going on there? The new one, the GP promo version, made a lot more sense. Where it's like, okay, it's like a giant skull. That's pretty dope. But I spent a really long time just turning my head, turning the card, trying to make sense of it. I was like, what is a Batterskull?
Is that is the mouth on top? Are we on the on the right side there?
There's a couple pieces of art like this. Look at a Signal Pest and tell me where its face is. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of cards that are like that. But irregardless and nevertheless.
All right. So moving here to...
I did have trouble with Batterskull, to be fair.
My number 9 is my only higher on my list. Ruben, do you have a number 9?
I have no hires and I have no sames this week. This is the Mox Ruby show this week. And this card's been talked about in the past on this show. I don't know if I've ever had it on one of my lists. That was one of what I was trying to do with my list, was talk about cards I hadn't talked about before as well. And I've never talked about this card because I hate this card. I don't like this card. Every time it's been played against me, it has killed me, and every time I've played with this card, I have lost with it. It's one of those cards, you know what I mean? But it has verifiable bona fide tournament pedigree. It won a Pro Tour and a Worlds in Sultai Energy and then later in Temur Energy, which was splashing specifically for the Scarab God.
God, this card's dumb.
The Scarab God is 3 colorless blue-black for a legendary creature god from Hour of Devastation. It is a 5/5 for 5. So what's the drawback? Well, it's a funny story. It doesn't have one. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses X life and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. Well, okay, sure. At least it doesn't, like, make zombies. Hold on. 2 colorless blue-black, exile target creature card from a graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of it, except that it's a 4/4 black zombie. That's any graveyard, Aaron.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And so, like, that would be fine.
Fine.
Now I can get rid of it, right? Like, I can deal it some damage. You know, I
Death
can
touch it.
I can
It's fine.
I can death touch it. I can Wrath of God it. Well, the problem is that when the Scarab God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step.
Yeah, you have to exile it.
What the hell
Yeah.
is this card?
This
man?
card just completely overshadowed the other gods. You know, does anyone talk about the Scorpion God? I mean, they talk about the Locust God in EDH, but when it comes to, like, you know, competitive Magic, the Scarab God was far and away the best one. I remember when this card was on its way out, I had just started playing Commander with my first EDH pod, and I remember my friend Peter had asked if he could proxy it because they hadn't come out yet, and we were all like, okay, it seems fine. And so he had a little image of the card and he put it on his phone and he was like, that's my Commander, and he just obliterated the table, like, without even really trying. Like, we just did not have a chance against this card, and that's when I knew that if it could be that dangerous in Commander with so little effort, that you could do the same thing in EDH, in Standard. And the same thing, you weren't even really facing, like, dedicated graveyard decks. Like, people felt like you had to go out of your way to make this good, but just by playing Magic, you know, you were able to take these value creatures that people were running and make them yours, and then being able to scry, and it got out of hand so quickly.
Yeah, the numbers on this card are Wizards of the Coast is a subsidiary of Hasbro, and they need to sell booster packs. And so the numbers on this freaking thing are all ridiculously on rate, and in terms of power, it's crazy. It's above rate, rather. Because for 5 mana to get a 5/5, okay. Then a cool scry ability, fine. And then a recursion, all right, sure, maybe. But now I can get to mess with anyone's graveyard at the entire table and make 4/4 black zombies of every cool creature, with every cool enter the battlefield thing ever. Okay. All right. Like, it's a $26 card for a reason.
Still.
Yeah, it's not going down. This card was one of the chase mythics from Hour of Devastation and was designed to be. And for what it's worth, I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay when Wizards is like, you know what? Here's the juice, right? You know it's going to be in the mythic slot. It's really cool. It's really powerful.
You can actually see our live reactions to this card from a live episode of Magic
Yes,
Mike,
because Wedge spoiled it.
Because Wedge spoiled it at midnight, and we were 60 minutes into a 75-minute show, and they're like, "Oh, Wedge got a spoiler," and then you can see us all go, "What? What?
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Like, all
whoa!"
at the same time, yeah.
And then you go like, "It can't be as good as we're thinking it is, right?" And it's better.
It was.
It's ridiculous. All right, move here to Aaron's number 9. What you got?
Speaking of Commander cards that are showing no signs of disappointment, this is a new card. This is one of the cards from the Commander 2020 set that I got a chance to take for a spin last night, and it lived up to my expectations. I got a serious case of the broken giggles. This deck is on its way to me. According to FedEx, it should be here tomorrow. And when it arrives, I will be a very, very happy camper. My number 9 is Cathril Aspect Warper. So Cathril is 2 colorless, a white, a black, and a green. It's a legendary creature nightmare insect with 3 power and 3 toughness. When Cathril enters the battlefield, put a flying counter on any creature you control. If a creature card in your graveyard has flying, repeat this process for first strike, double strike, death touch, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, trample, and vigilance. And then put a +1/+1 counter on Cathril for each counter put on a creature this way. So all those random cards that have keyword soup, like Aerial Responder, Zatalpa, this is exactly the deck that you want them in. And so you bin a bunch of them, and then when the time is right, you cast this card. You're probably going to put all the counters on it, and before you know it, you have a 12/12, double strike, indestructible, hexproof, lifelink, menace, and it's just a nightmare. I've always wanted a Voltron deck, but there wasn't a version that spoke to me. And so if I can play Voltron and put things in my graveyard, this is exactly where I want to be.
Not only is this a soul flare, not only is this a soul flare, but is this a one-shot commander? You can kill people in one attack.
Oh yeah, I killed our friend H2O Happy Dude.
Usually they try to not print one. There are a bunch of 2-shot commanders. Things like Skitherix.
You know, what's interesting to me is the words that are the keywords that are not on the card. Haste is not on this card.
Yeah, obviously haste can't be on this card.
Of course it could. We're in 2020. We're in 2020. All bets are off when it comes to power
also
level.
something interesting in terms of
counter
rules
doesn't
interactions. So do you remember the 2 knights from Dominaria, the black one and the white one that gave you hexproof from? That still counts as an instance of hexproof. And so if you have them in the graveyard, it will still give Cathril just hexproof. It won't get the hexproof from, but it's still an instance of hexproof, and that's a really neat thing.
That's
cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
This thing gets out of hand so quickly, and I just laughed and laughed. And it's not like, and Soulflayer makes you exile them. You don't have to do that with this. So all those juicy little morsels, you can also just bring back somehow, and
All
so
those
it's so much fun.
that you left, not chromium. What's that card? The bestow 5-color thing.
Chromanticore?
Chromanticore.
Well, you can't play Chromanticore because it's 5 colors.
Well,
My
okay,
goodness.
fine.
That free negate, if you control a commander, is $35. Goodness gracious. All right, that's from the newest Commander 20 set. All right.
You can find at coolstuffinc.com.
That's right. Cool stuff in stock. When we have some, because they,
I mean, I didn't want to bring it up, but I didn't buy mine.
This is where we
you
keep
guys,
all of our Commander product. If we had it.
if Wizards was shipping it, we could. Like, we didn't get enough for our pre-orders. It was a mess. And Wizards has said as much that, there was shipment delays and whatever. Because, the world was ending. That said, moving on here to number 8. This is just one of my favorite cards of all time. And based on today, Mark Rosewater released some hints for Core 2021, and I love the hints. I love the silly, we're going to print something with so-and-so text or whatever, something we've never done, or reprint from Revised or whatever it is. And one of the things he said was, we're going to reprint a Mythic French Vanilla Rare. And I was like, please, let it be part of one of the coolest decks of all time. It even has a connection to Kibler because Kibler's awesome. It really showcased what was like cool and awesome about M10 and why the core set, the M10 set, was powerful and interesting because new cards had showed up in the core set for the first time, and Baneslayer Angel was there to be awesome and gorgeous. Yeah. Absolutely. Baneslayer Angel is 2 white and 3 generic mana for a mythic angel with 5. She's a 5/5 with flying, first strike, lifelink, protection from demons and from dragons, which again, we have lots of demons and dragons right now in standard. And this is, I think, technically French vanilla. And I think would be a fantastic reprint in Magic 2021.
I agree. I think that, if you're going to reprint it anywhere, Core Set is the place to print it, right? Like,
absolutely.
This is where it belongs.
Right.
And, when Baneslayer was first printed in M10, it was, whoa, what is happening? What it's been in, obviously it was in Kibler's Zoo
Mythic deck. Yeah.
And in Naya Lightsaber, our favorite. So it's won major tournaments in the past, but it's like, now it's kind of outclassed, right?
Now it's fine. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but I think it's very good. Lyra Dawnbringer was obviously very similar, and she was fine in standard. She was $12 to $15 or whatever.
In standard,
and I think Baneslayer would fill the same niche in that you need something good against aggro. It stabilizes the board. It can be a finisher. Like, it's awesome in limited, super fun to play in limited, as long as you give them common answers to it. Baneslayer's dope.
Cool.
All right, Ruben, what's number 8?
Oh, I was about to take a drink of water.
I got you on that one.
My number 8 is a card that I am desperately and madly in love with because I have done so many dirty things with this card.
Goodness, it's a family show, Ruben.
It's also, well, listen, I have a particular subset of interests, and one of them is stealing my opponent's planeswalkers that are ready to ultimate with zealous conscripts.
Oh!
So that is that's one of my things. If you're looking for, what do you like in a Magic card? One of them is stealing planeswalkers and then, -4 overrun everything, or -8 you win the game, whatever. Zealous conscripts, 4 colorless and a red for a 3/3 human warrior with haste. When Zealous Conscript enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent until end of turn. Untap that permanent, it gains haste until end of turn. This, of course, was part of the Aristocrats deck that Tom Martell won Pro Tour Gatecrash with in Montreal, because stealing stuff and then sacrificing it to one of your various sundry aristocrats is a ton of fun.
Yes.
Yeah, and we see this even in Standard now. You know, you have Curse the Firstborn. I think there's something the Firstborn.
Claim the Firstborn.
Yeah, and so you have Claim the Firstborn and the Oven. Like this is main deckable. Like normally things like this are kind of like sideboardy, or there's like a 1-of or a 2-of. That was like a big part of that red-black sacrifice deck, was stealing these creatures and feeding them to the Oven. And yeah, I have a lot of fond memories of this card. I've even put it in a couple commander decks where you're more likely to have more permanents to choose from and different kinds of permanents to choose from. And it's also just a 3/3 body with haste, which is sometimes just the icing on the cake.
Yep.
It's so rare that Wizards lets you steal temporarily a permanent.
Yeah.
You always get a creature. You don't necessarily get a permanent. I would even be more intrigued by a red spell that gains control of a planeswalker until end of turn, and it gains haste and whatever. Like that would be really interesting. And that's another sort of, design thing they have to go. But Zealous Conscripts was super duper cool because of that very aspect. Taking the planeswalkers, making them pay essentially for going up all the way to Ultimate. You're going to Ultimate, you're playing against a deck with red mana. Are you going to, are you going to go? Are you going to risk it? And sometimes you can just bluff your way into them not ultimating their planeswalker, which would have won the game entirely because they were so afraid of conscripts. This is a card that Aaron Forsythe at one time, kind of just asked the community, he's like, do you guys like this effect? Like, do you like this thing? And I'm like, I freaking love this thing. The gameplay on this thing is awesome. It is fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, it's not an automatic, do I pump up my Tameo the Moon Sage to ultimate level, or do I just leave it here?
Right. Yeah, and there were people who would, be bluffed out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Zealous Conscripts is great. I love the idea of stealing permanents, but again, that includes lands, and Wizards doesn't like it when we steal the lands. But then they made Agent of Treachery, but they just banned it, so I don't know. So whatever. Okay, whatever. And that happened today as of film date, which is fun. Aaron, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is a really flavorful card that has found a home in my Rakdos the Showstopper deck, which has a demon tribal element to it. And I just love everything about this. It's surprisingly inexpensive. Another great budget find if you're looking to play, black and Commander, and you're looking for a neat card draw option that could also just win you the game. My number 8 is Liliana's Contract. So Liliana's Contract is 3 colorless and 2 black. It is an enchantment, originally printed in Core Set 2019. It says, when Liliana's Contract enters the battlefield, you draw 4 and lose 4 life, which is perfectly fine. Like, you will take that in EDH. That's cool. It's an enchantment, so you can also blink it and bounce it. Great, you'll take it. On top of that, it says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more demons with different names, you win the game. And this is a callback to Liliana's Contract with Koptifed, Belzenlock, Grizzlebrand, and Razakath. Yes. And beautiful art by Bastion Daharme. I have won games with this card before. The tension where you're there, you've got the demons, and the table's trying to figure out, quick, does anyone have a board wipe? Does anyone have enchantment removal? We have nothing. Great, I'm going to untap and win the game. And so it just feels incredible. It's a beautiful card, and it's just good.
Yeah. Maybe one of the best Magic story-centric top-downs ever. I mean, we have Lovestruck Beast, which tells the story of Beauty of the Beast. That's not a story that was invented by writers at Wizards of the Coast. That's been around since, time immemorial. This, Liliana's story of the 4 demons, was created in-house, and then they made this card later, which I love. I think it's so cool. The way that it ticks down, the ability that it has. I mean,
for this to be sort of the Black Tidings, and for Black to get the cards, but you have to lose the life. And if it had been nothing more than that,
it's crazy that Black doesn't have draw 4, gain 4.
Correct.
On anything, I don't think, except for this.
Yeah, pretty much. And, draw 4, lose 4. Yeah. Right. Because for me, that second part of the card is cool, but not really necessary. I feel like it would see play as a really cool Black rare if it didn't have that part, but I'll take it. I'll take a really cool accidental win con, which is dope. Let's see here. So let's move on here to our number 7. Now, my number 7 is similar somewhat to my number 8, in that they are both angels. And I love angels. Angels are great. Angels are sweet. And just like Baneslayer and some others in the world, wizards will just sometimes be like, it's in your face. Look at it. Look at how powerful this is. We're making it the best freaking thing you can do. And when you saw Archangel Addison from GP Detroit, Christine looking super BA, absolutely amazing. You just knew that like Wizards was going to make this great. It was going to be a thing you're going to have to deal with for the next however many months until Shadows of Innistrad left. It was one of the primo like selling the set type of cards from Shadows over Innistrad. We were back to transforming cards, and Archangel Addison turning into Addison the Purifier was absolutely amazing. Archangel Addison is 2 white, 3 generic mana for a mythic legendary angel with flash, flying, vigilance. When she enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. When a non-angel creature you control dies, transform Archangel Addison at the beginning of the next upkeep. Note that, the beginning of the next upkeep, not this turn. Okay. So when you transform it on the beginning of the next upkeep, you deal 3 damage to each other creature and to each opponent. Not you, not 3 damage to everybody, 3 damage to each other creature and each opponent. It's a 6/5 flyer at that point.
I was at GP Detroit during the big reveal. It was during Eldrazi Winter, and I'll never forget being by the pairings board, and we were all, crowded around. It was on the far right side of the venue. The chapel was behind it because they had built these elaborate sets that you could actually visit, and there was like a gong sound or a bell sound, and everybody stopped what they were doing. And I think at one point Christine even had it as her Twitter header, because you just see like her, the church, and just a crowd. Like no one, the whole far left side of the venue is empty because everyone had to see this happen. It was absolutely a moment. And this card was definitely a test. For as long as Addison was in Standard, your deck had to pass the Addison test of can you deal with this card? And if you can't, you might as well not bother showing up. And, it was good in mid-range decks. It was good in control decks. It was good. I think they even played it in the rally decks, didn't they? Like it was just stupid.
I mean, it certainly had a long life across a wide variety of archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
The one that's most indelible in my mind is Mardu Vehicles. But it also
Mardu Vehicles was huge.
It was in aggro
White Blue
decks.
Flash.
Mm-hmm.
It was in collected company decks, even though you couldn't company into it.
That's what I was thinking of.
Right. It was in green white tokens in when Steve Rubin won the Pro Tour.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas Blohan had it in Orzhov Control. So everything from aggro to mid-range to control used this card.
Oh yeah.
Very rarely have I seen a card where there was so much hype and then it exceeded the hype.
Yes.
And this is one of them.
This was like, oh, this is probably, very, very good. And you play with it and you're like, oh my God, this card is the best, the truth. And you will now look out for 5 open mana until it goes away from Standard. That's how it worked. Let's move on to number 7 for Ruben. What you got?
My number 7 is a green 5-drop that I have not talked about before. Okay. And it's a green 5-drop that in certain metagames replaced another green 5-drop that I've talked about before that we might talk about later. Because there was a metagame for a while there where all you wanted to do was have black, green, and white mana, and you had Unburial Rites, and then you had like mid-range stuff, and you had Restoration Angels and like Angel of Serenity, and there was a bunch of things that you could be doing. There was a main target for your Restoration Angels that was a green 5-drop. But I want to talk about what happens when everything's a mirror match, because eventually it got to the point where you didn't want that other 5-drop. You just wanted more acidic slimes. You just wanted as many acidic slimes as you could possibly get. And
Card's great.
That has never really gone away, because acidic slime was originally in, Magic 2013? 2010.
2010, yeah.
It was in 2010, 11, 12, 13...
Mm-hmm.
And 13 is the last core set, but they've also reprinted it in a bunch of other Commander things.
But it hasn't been back in Standard since 2013.
Not for a long time, no. Acidic Slime is 3 colorless green for 2/2 ooze with Death Touch. When Acidic Slime enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. The other thing that separates, of course, that I mentioned earlier is not only is it in the cube, it did win a Pro Tour. This one in Brian Kibler's Kessig Titan deck from Pro Tour Dark Ascension.
Yeah, this card is just a monster. This is one of those things where I wonder if Wizards is okay with it because it destroys lands, but it does so for 5 mana on top of a 2/2, so it's more or less fine. The fact that it has Death Touch, the fact that it gets rid of artifacts and enchantments and lands and still has a Death Toucher left over, the amount of value that's just stuck inside this 5-drop. There was definitely a weird time during that standard where it was like, okay, you can be doing this one thing with a green 5-drop, which is cool, but this is the green 5-drop that's going to determine who's going to win the actual match.
This was also in the same format as Progenitor Mimic.
Yep.
And so, there were decks out there towards the end, that summer when everything was legal, and there were people that wanted nothing more than to just put a Progenitor Mimic on this card, and it just drives you crazy. And, Abzan Reanimator was a thing. This was a fine reanimation target just to get rid of whatever was in your way. Mm-hmm. And the perfect 2/2 with Death Touch. This is exactly who Death Touch is for. Sometimes you see like Grave Titan, and you're like, why does a 6/6 have Death Touch? Because it's so big, it's probably already killing what gets in front of it, but giving a bear Death Touch, that's your worst nightmare right there, because you don't want to take the 2, but you also don't want to attack into the 2 either. And it's just perfect.
Yeah. You have, this thing saw play in Jund mid-range, Elf decks was in there, Junk Rites decks was in there. Like, it had green in it. This was always in the conversation.
Yeah. And obviously it's in the cube. I mean, it does. So the thing about this card is that it does something when it comes into play. Mm-hmm. So it's a Man of War. But it also has like real sustainable impact on the battlefield because of that Death Touch. So it's also a Bane Slayer.
It is the package.
It's the whole package.
Absolutely. Aaron, what's number 7?
My number 7 is one of my favorite commanders, and I've spoken of it lovingly on multiple episodes. I just retuned it a little bit, and I played it on Olivia Gobert-Hicks' stream the other night, and it felt good. It made me realize why I love it, and it just makes me so damn happy. My number 7 is Sheray, Shizo's Caretaker. So Sheray is 4 colorless and a black. It's originally printed in Betrayers of Kamigawa, Evan.
Hey!
I know that you love yourself some Kamigawa.
I sure do.
It is a legendary creature spirit with 2 power and 2 toughness. It says whenever a creature with power 1 or less is put into your graveyard from play, you may return that creature card to play under your control at the end of turn if Sheray is also still in play. One of the things I love about this deck so much, and one of the reasons why I always recommend Sheray to people, is that it is so customizable. Like, there are so many creatures out there in black and colorless. If you just go through Gatherer or Scryfall and you look up creatures 1 or less, you can really season this to taste. Like, there are so many ways that you can build this. You can also just be really janky and do the Shadowborn Apostle thing, where you sacrifice them all and just get demons. That's possible too. And so the possibilities are endless. This deck rarely plays the same way twice. It's a lot to manage in terms of the triggers because you have so much going on. But once you really get those loops going and you just realize how exploitable it is, it just feels so good. And I love the light bulb moment where you're playing with somebody, they see you playing some really crappy, 1/1s, and they don't get it. And then you put out like the final piece and then they're like, oh God. And then you
Lord.
realize that this is a problem. And it just feels so good.
Sheray being knocked down to an uncommon in Ultimate Masters. If you're hanging out during these quarantine times, you ain't got not much to do.
Oh no.
I'm willing to bet that Kamigawa and or Kamigawa block has the highest percentage of cards that are rare that could be easily knocked down to uncommon.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, like a lot. Like, there's a few that I don't think so, but there's just a ton where you're like, that's an uncommon. And it's not even a very good one these days, quite frankly. The fix to Kamigawa, and I've been meaning to make a video about this, and God help me, if someone from Wizards is listening, the fix to Kamigawa is ninjas. Fixed Kamigawa is always ninjas. You need senseis, you need shinobi, you need, what does the black ninja look like versus the green ninja or the white ninja? You need the different houses. They're thinking too big. They're always like this, spirits in the world and the universe. Right. No, man, it's 5 different dojos. That's how it works. Make it awesome. People love ninjas. Ninjas are cool. That's why Kamigawa is cool. I don't know. Shizo's Caretaker is awesome. And if anything, I just love watching you talk about it, Aaron, because you've talked about it so often and it's such a great card. It's so much fun. Super cool card. Let's move on here to number 6. Goodness gracious. Number 6. This card of mine. I don't know if when this card finally leaves Standard, if we're going to look at it and go, that was a mistake. Or if we're going to look back and go, that was powerful, but ultimately not overpowered. I honestly don't know. This is a card that's one of those, like, it's so powerful and ubiquitous and just see so much freaking play. And in so many decks that have done so many busted things, Nyssa, who shakes the world, has really shaken the world of MTG. This card is bananas. It's 2 green, 3 generic mana for a rare legendary Planeswalker Nyssa. I know, right? So it starts with 5 loyalty, with a static ability of whenever you tap a forest for mana, add an additional green mana. It has a +1 of put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target non-creature land you control. Untap it. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with vigilance and haste. That's still a land. And it also has -8. You get an emblem with, quote, lands you control have indestructible. Search your library for any number of forest cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. I've played with it. I've played against it. I've seen it be amazing. I've seen it do some, like, really dumb things. I've seen entire essays that have tried to explain that Nyssa is a busted, broken card because doubling your mana breaks magic.
Yeah.
And that's where
there
we're
were
at.
calls for this to be banned. You know, obviously Standard has been a very contentious format these last few years. And, you know, people were trying to figure out, do we get rid of Oko? Do we get rid of Hydroid Crisis? And this was another one of those cards that people were like, you know, this just feels hopeless to play against. That, you know, when somebody, you know, green already has been the color to beat for a while now. And then on top of it, you have this card that can really just bury you in the dust. And, you know, on the one hand, it's like, yay, Nyssa got a good card. Right. Because, you know, we were all thinking it. But yeah, she really has shaken up the metagame in really just devastating ways.
Shaking it up. That's what you did. Yeah, this card is just bananas. And it's hard to say too many good things about it in terms of power level. This is the card I want to slam off the top of the deck when we're in the top deck war. Like, let me get the Nyssa first and everything else just rolls behind it. It's amazing.
Yeah, Nyssa's absolutely backbreaking in every situation. There was a minute where the entire metagame was around who could get Nyssa down, who could resolve a Nyssa.
How fast.
We're past that a little bit, but it's still very good, and it won't take much for Nyssa to be back on top of the metagame.
There you go. Ruben, what's your number 6?
Okay, my number 6 technically won a Pro Tour in a draft deck. Now, that's not why it's on the list. I'm reaching with that. The real reason why it's on this list is because it's banned in Commander. Now, it's been banned in Commander as long as I've been playing Commander, so I can't speak to the veracity of the claims that it's completely broken. However, the number of cards that I can think of that would be absolutely miserable in combination with Optic Mirror in Commander lead me to believe that a correct choice was made and that this one is probably solidly on the banned list for the foreseeable future and ever. Optic Mirror, 5 generic mana for an artifact from Darksteel. It has Imprint. Pay X and tap Optic Mirror. You may exile an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost X from your hand. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may copy a card exiled with Optic Mirror. If you do, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Basically, anything that says, take an extra turn, you put on Optic Mirror, and you take all the rest of the turns forever, is the play. But you could just do what Nikolai Herzog did when he won Pro Tour San Diego in 2004, one of his 2 back-to-back limited Pro Tour wins, by the way, which is why he was, I think I had him as number 2 on my Hall of Famers, or number 1 on my Hall of Famers list. He had Barter and Blood, he had Terror. Like, you don't need to do too much.
It's true.
You just need to do it every turn forever.
Just for any removal spell forever and ever, amen. And also, you know, in a format like Commander, just imagine the stupid craziness that's going to fire off every single turn with this card. Only printed once in Darksteel, still worth $2.50 or so, despite you're not going to really play it anywhere else.
If it weren't banned in Commander, this would be a $30 card.
Yes, this would be $1 million. They'd have special versions for Commanders or whatever that they put in Ultimate Masters and all sorts of crazy crap. That said, Aaron, what's number 6?
I've seen a lot of reanimation spells in my day. I've played them all. I've played Reanimate, I've played Exhume, I've played Unearth, I've done all of that. But when you go back and look at the history of the game, there has, to my knowledge, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, there aren't too many examples. I can think of 2 that allow you to cast a reanimation spell from the graveyard. Because if you're playing any sort of reanimator deck, you're probably going to be trying to put things in your graveyard, and you may not be doing it very eloquently. So So you're bound to get the very reanimation spell you want in your graveyard, and that feels bad. But my number 6 doesn't care about that because you can cast it from the graveyard. They haven't given us anything since, and it is amazing. My number 6 is Unburial Rites. So Unburial Rites is 4 colorless and a black. It is a sorcery originally printed in Innistrad, and it just says return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. But if you happen to put it in your graveyard when you're just milling with your mulches or whatever, you can also just flash it back for 3 and a white. Abzan Reanimator was a tier 1 deck in Standard at this time. This has seen play in the Gifts Rites decks in older formats where you play this and Gifts Ungiven to get the specific package that you need to be able to lock the opponent down. This is just a brilliant, elegant card, very memorable flavor text of I'll crave the blessed sleep if you receive it. That art of the dead person trying to get out of the crypt. And there's just very few cards that are like it, and it's just incredible.
That art in particular is incredibly evocative. Yeah, just unbelievable. Like you can feel the motion of that right there. This is besides Dread Return, I think, and Unburial Rites is kind of the long and short.
Isn't it just those two?
Because they're so freaking powerful. Yeah. Like,
and you get to use them both. You can repeat them both. Well,
the fact that you want to be overloading your graveyard, you get to use things like Tracker's Instincts, Mulch, even Faithless Looting, although Faithless Looting you can still use with traditional reanimation spells. But the fact that you can put things directly from your library into your graveyard and cast them from there, as Aaron well knows, not a thing you get a lot. No. And we have it in Historic now, which is interesting. I've seen a couple of Unburial Rites lists in Historic.
Send me your Unburial Rites
Historic list, is currently, in my opinion, the sweetest format in Magic.
I've heard a lot of good things about it. If anybody's brewing and you've got an Unburial Rites list, send them over.
I played against one that was that had like Stitcher Suppliers, the 3/1 for green black that I previewed as part of the Broken Pact that I'm forgetting, the Glowspore Shaman, and then was trying to reanimate Lotleth Trolls was the one that I saw, which was kind of cool.
It's kind of cool. Yeah, this, of course, I mean, Rites was just in like so many decks. Black, white, green, black, white, whatever. Anything reanimatory, anything with sort of long-term. There were 4 color Rites decks that were out there as well. This card is just incredibly, incredibly powerful. So even if you're kind of paying more than retail the first time, you're getting all the value all the time. Particularly with a format with freaking Gristlebrand in it. Like, that was in Standard. Ridiculous. Let's move on here to number 5. Now, this card, there's Standard was and is a thing, right? And Standard Importance was a thing, and that's great. And this card certainly was fantastic in Standard. Don't get me wrong. But for a while there, Wizards had a format called Extended, and everybody hates Extended. There's a whole Magic show. The title is Everybody Hates Extended. But Extended was a format, and it was a rotating format of a lot of old cards. And when this card showed up, it basically said, look, I am your extended metagame. And if you're going to play an extended, you're going to say, how am I going to deal with Mirari's Wake? Yep. Mirari's Wake was huge in Standard, and it was ridiculous in Extended. It's a white, a green, 3 generic mana for a rare enchantment. Heck, these days, a mythic rare enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced. Nice, clear, simple, straightforward, and a rock star in Standard and Extended for years and years and years.
Well, I mean, it was also good in Standard. Wake won Worlds in 2003.
For sure.
Daniel Zink. I played a ton of Wake in every format in which it was legal, both alongside of Mirari and decks without Mirari. Mirari's Wake being able to, in particular, things like Decree of Justice, which not only allowed you to double your mana to make twice as many soldiers, but then those soldiers then became 2/2s. Amazing. Yep. Really just spectacular. Another card that has a major win and is also in a lot of cubes.
Yeah, this card is still worth like $17, $18.
Also in Historic.
And also in Historic now, officially as the last release.
I'm going to give an unpopular opinion.
Oh boy.
I think we should bring Extended back. Now, I'm willing to argue this one on like a real show in a red zone, because I think that a extended, not capitally extended, but a larger rotating format will solve a lot of the metagame problems with bannings that we've seen thus far.
The fact that Modern
doesn't rotate. The fact that Pioneer doesn't rotate and Historic isn't really going to rotate
is important.
I think is a problem.
It's not a problem. It's a feature. It's not a bug. It's a feature.
But Standard is great.
Standard's fine.
So why can't we just have another rotating format?
Because once you get to that length of time and the amount of investment in both time, whether it's practice or just, skill or just having their collection or whatever, people get very upset when their old stuff is going to rotate, invalidating decks. So you don't want to buy into those decks.
It'll still be legal in Modern. It'll still be legal in the non-rotating formats. I'm
you
not
can't
saying
have every
Modern.
Are we really looking for an old rotating format? Are we really looking for an old rotating format? Is that what we want?
I mean, an older. I think instead of a 1.5 year, 18-month standard and nothing else, we can have an 18-month standard and a 4 year extended.
What's your number 5, Ruben?
My number 5, stop me if you've heard this verse, same as the first. 5 colorless mana artifact banned in Commander. Another one.
I'm with you.
I mean...
Oh, no.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. Everyone knows what's happening now. This one, a legendary artifact, was a big problem while it was legal. Also one of the most ridiculous cards in Brawl, when Brawl was not yet online. My number 5 is, indeed, Paradox Engine. Paradox Engine, 5 colorless mana for a legendary artifact from Aether Revolt. Whenever you cast a spell, untap all non-land permanents you control. This is ridiculous. It is a card that saw a little bit of, if I want to say vintage play.
Yeah.
Because you could untap your Moxes and stuff. Mm-hmm. And was very popular in Commander, particularly amongst elf decks. Pretty good with, mirror type strategies or anything else like that, not to mention just alongside Soul Ring and Mana Vault and the like.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say, so I first had this in my Sharoom deck, and I remember I tend to be a net decker when it comes to Commander, and so I remember looking at this list, and it was $5 or $6 at the time, and I was just like, ew, what do I want this for? And so I just bought it anyways. I didn't really understand it, and then once I played with it a couple times, I was like, oh. And then I put it in my Locust God deck, and this card actually got banned the same day that Golgari Grave Troll got restricted in Vintage. And everybody assumed that I would be upset over Grave Troll, but I honestly knew the Grave Troll restriction was coming. I was furious about this banning because I had finally clued into how good this card was. I was doing broken things on my Locust God deck, and they took it away from me.
Look, it's still $5 or $6 now after being banned, and the invention's only $40. Look, this is the exact type of card that one day Wizards is going to print something stupid, and it's going to make no sense except this thing plus that new thing just breaks in half, because this is such a weird line of text to have on a card and to have it be static and to have it be free, and it just kind of happens every time you cast a spell. They were doing weird combo stuff with Gilded Lotus with this card, amongst other things or whatever. This card was weird and silly and crazy, and again, one day, just mark the words, in Pioneer, probably Modern, maybe even Legacy, this is the type of card that goes completely haywire because some weird mechanic, some new card, some new thing makes Paradox Engine broken. Because it sure as hell was pretty broken in Commander, let me tell you. Ooh. Aaron, what's number 5?
My number 5 is a card that just recently went through a price spike because people in a competitive EDH realized that it's actually pretty good. I've been a huge fan of this card for a while. It is one of the reasons why I play the Modern deck that is named after it. It's also one of the reasons that I sometimes dabble in Legacy and Vintage Storm, not to mention the amazing art by Jeremy Jarvis. My number 5 is AdNauseam. Nice. AdNauseam is 3 colorless and 2 black. It's only been printed one time in Shards of Alara. Currently going for $30+ depending on where you shop. It is an instant. It says reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost, and you can repeat this process any number of times. So there is a deck in Modern called AdNauseam, which is gaining a little bit of a new audience recently with Thassa's Oracle. And so you play Angel's Grace, which is a card that prevents you from losing the game. And so you essentially draw your entire deck. You go to like negative something, which is fine. And then you play either Thassa's Oracle or Lightning Storm or Lab Maniac, and you proceed to win the game. Amazing artwork by Jeremy Jarvis. I mean, just there's so many little Easter eggs in this. Every time I look at this, I feel like I discover something that I didn't notice the first time, with his eyes taped open and the Dimir signet on his head and the veins and the quills, and it's just incredible. And it's just a fun card, like one of the most black cards. It feels so risky, but it also makes you feel so alive when you cast it.
This to me looks like an easy slam dunk for double masters. This is exactly the type of card that you want to put into the newest master set. It's been reprinted. It's been printed one time. It's worth $30. That's a very magical mark for Magic cards. It's like the 20, 30, 40, $60 level. It makes perfect sense, because why in the world have they waited so long to reprint this freaking card? I don't get it. And it's also that expensive because you don't usually run one AdNauseam. You're running the both.
Yes. You run 4 in your deck, or you run 1 in your sideboard to wish for.
Right.
Yeah.
AdNauseam Tendrils, or Ant in Legacy, the AdNauseam deck in Modern, the Epic Storm typically uses at least a copy somewhere. AdNauseam is it's my favorite Modern deck of all time. Nice. I played this deck at Grand Prix Richmond way back when we were at Grand Prix Richmond. You can also combine this, in addition to Angel's Grace, you have Phyrexian Unlife, so you have sort of duplicates of the other half of the combo, so that once you find your AdNauseam, you have multiple things that you can start working with. I love AdNauseam. It's just like a perfect combination of what black is meant to do, art, name, everything is perfect.
I'm always a fan of, you may repeat this process any number of times.
We know. We've seen you do it with kids.
Wow.
Right? Wow.
Hashtag any number of kids.
Hashtag KidNauseam. Got it. All right. Let's move on here.
KidNauseam is nice.
For number 4. Ruben, what's number 4?
My number 4, say it with me, is Banned in Commander. Now, this one, not an artifact. This one, I don't think has ever done anything in any format other than Commander. And it was a little surprising to me, honestly, that this one was a problem card. But once I saw what it could do, Prophet of Krufix was very obviously a card that needed to go away.
Oh my God.
Once I saw what was going on.
Yeah.
Prophet of Krufix, 3 colorless, green-blue, for a 2/3 human wizard. Untap all creatures and lands you control during each other player's untap step. You may cast creature spells as though they had flash. So, when you have a 4-player game, and you get to have 4 untap steps, obviously that's going to be better than having one opponent and, double your untap steps. This was also very good in draft, in Theros draft, I will say, because you could play this, untap, and flash in a Nessian Asp or whatever. But certainly in Commander, where you have so many ways to gain card advantage, to draw cards, all your creatures are cantrips and things like that. Prophet of Krufix could get way out of hand way too quick.
There for a minute, I dabbled in some Commander, and this was a cool stuff. Back when we could still play people in real life, and at the time, it was right before this got banned in Commander. And so someone there had a blue-green, Krufix deck or whatever, and gotten Prophet of Krufix out, and it was murder. They were just drawing cards, putting lands into play. Oh, it's your turn, untap all of them, draw more cards, put more lands in play. By the time it got back to their turn, they've essentially taken 4 extra freaking turns. Everything has flash, everything's an instant whatever. So, this card was not remotely fair, and I was definitely happy to see it go. In my very small, limited, itty-bitty window of playing Commander, I was like, mother of God, this card is ridiculous. And I'm certainly happy to see it go. Aaron, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is a very important, necessary card that honestly just keeps formats fair. And I shudder to think about what the world would be like if we didn't have this safety valve keeping everybody honest. My number 4 is Force of Will. So Force of Will is 3 colorless and 2 blue. It was originally printed in Alliances. It's an interrupt. Remember when we had interrupts? And it says you may pay 1 life and remove a blue card in your hand from the game instead of paying Force of Will's casting cost. Effects that prevent or redirect damage cannot be used to counter this loss of life. Remember when they used to staple that to everything?
Mm-hmm.
And then it says counter target spell. And so, this is the card that keeps Belcher at bay and, the crazy dredge decks and Reanimator and things like that. And so, this is a really important card. This is one of those cards that modern players had been asking for a really long time because they felt like, blue players specifically felt like they just didn't have the tools to compete with the Trons and the Dredges and the Juns and things like that. And now you have Force of Negation, which does a reasonable impression. You're very rarely ever paying 5 with this, but if you do get to the point where your opponent can pay 5, you're probably in some trouble because they're in a really, really good spot. And so usually they do that just to send a message, but very important card. I mean, even Dredge is running this now, to do what it needs to do. And I can't imagine a world without it.
It's weird to kind of, when you go back and look at sort of different milestones, in Magic, and how when this came out, it was not the biggest thing in the set. It was not the most important thing in the set. It's not the most exciting thing in the set. It wasn't the most expensive card in the set. Slowly but surely became recognized and became known and understood as one of the linchpins of these formats, that certain formats just would not function the way that we imagine them functioning if this card did not exist. And that's pretty incredible.
Not only that, but it was printed as an uncommon, which I always think is hilarious for some reason.
And there are people who've bought Alliances boxes and not found a one of them, as uncommons are wont to do from time to time.
Yeah.
And it maintains its value. If anything, it feels like it gets more expensive with every reprint.
Well, Wizards has been very careful about reprinting this at all. They've only reprinted it essentially one time, 2 times, I guess, if you want to count the Amonkhet invocations, kinda. Eternal Masters I would consider the big reprint, and they also had a Judge version in 2014 that was a big deal, and it's still $313, which is no joke. So you have a card that always essentially fluctuates from $50 to $100, depending on where you're at in the market. Around $60 right now, is always a great choice. Is rumored to be in Double Masters. I guess we'll see, but is always a great card to have just in Magic general. This is one of those cards I'm thankful exists because it makes Magic work.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and I assure you, when it was first previewed and debuted, no one was like, "Oh, this is what's going to make Magic fantastic." Like, well, no, they were just like, "This is card disadvantage," and I'm like, "You're insane." Right. I don't know what.
We were like, "Ew."
We're getting to a point in Magic where card advantage is almost a foreign concept as the card quality goes up so high.
Yeah,
it almost doesn't matter if you're at disadvantage anymore because every individual card just takes over a game by itself. Yeah. It's wild.
Everything's so good, does so much stuff. There's so many words on all the cards. Well, let me tell you, for my number 4, there were a lot of words on this one. Not a ton of words, all right? And Wizards seems to be learning the same lesson over and over again. And it's weird to me that 20 years ago, they made things free and it broke stuff. And then in 2020, they made stuff free and it broke stuff. Because treachery is 100% free. Baby, it's free. It's better than free. If you just try a little tiny smidge. It's also on the reserve list, so it's probably never going below $25 or $26. It is 2 blue, 3 generic mana for a rare from Urza's Destiny. It is a enchantment aura, enchant creature, and when treachery enters the battlefield, untap up to 5 lands, and you control enchanted creature. This card is so bananas that even today, 2020, with the craziness that we have in these sets, the complexity stuff from Ikoria, the pushed mythic rares we live with every day, this card is still unbelievably overpowered for what it does. I just can't.
Still a first pick in queue.
Still first pick. Easy. Just slam it. Done.
Yeah.
Crazy.
A lot of good Urza's Destiny representation between this and Plow Under.
It's true.
So, this card is ridiculous. All of the free things... when this enters the battlefield, untap lands equal to the converted mana cost are absurd. It's and you might forget that back in the year 2000, when this was in Standard, there were lands that tapped for multiple mana. So you could have this in concert with Tolarian Academy or Phyrexian Tower, things of that nature as well.
It's just dumb. It's great. I mean, I love it. I love overpowered garbage, sure. But like, it's overpowered. There's just no two ways about it. And somehow 20 years later, they're like, can we just let them cast this stuff for free? Is free okay? Free sounds good. Let's try free. Move on here to our top 3. Ruben, what's your number 3?
My number 3, it's another card that's a 5 colorless mana artifact that's banned in a format.
Oh.
This one, again, a legendary.
Okay.
Apparently I have 2 legendary artifacts on my top 10 list. This one banned in Brawl.
Okay.
And led to the banning of a land in Standard. Very close to winning Mythic Championship 5, although Gruul aggro in the hands of Javier Dominguez ended up taking down Jean-Emmanuel Dupre's Bant Golos deck. Because my number 3 is Golos Tireless Pilgrim. Golos is a legendary artifact creature scout, which costs 5 mana. When Golos enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. It is a 3/5, and it does have another activated ability. For 2 colorless Wooburg, total of 7 mana, 2 colorless white, blue, black, red, green, : exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn without paying their mana costs. Sort of ran Brawl for a second. Like, every other deck I would play against was Brawl because the color identity for it was all 5 colors.
Yep.
Field of the Dead, while banned in Standard, was still legal in Brawl, and all you needed to do was play one of them. So it was very easy to go Golos, get your 1 land, and go to town the next turn, because the next turn you'd have your 7th land.
I could not believe when I actually played with this card that the second ability is just a : you can activate as many times as you have 7 mana of the right color to play it. You can do that. It's just ridiculous. This card as a mini Primeval Titan, because when you think of Primeval Titan, yeah, it's great as a 6/6 trampler, but what's it doing? It's going to find those lands. This finds any land. This accelerates you next turn into its own ability as long as you meet your land drop. There's like, this is a card that right now is like $2.50 or so. Like, go buy every copy you freaking can. This is the perfect type of card. It's going to cost $1 million because they're not going to print stuff that does things like this because they tried it and this thing is busted. This card is super duper good. I don't see them going anywhere close to something like this in the future.
Spawned a new archetype in Vintage. Golos stacks is all the rage right now. You think this is scary at 5 mana. Try running it in a format with Black Lotus, Moxen, and Mishra's Workshop.
Oh my god.
Getting a turn 1 or turn 2 Golos is not unreasonable. And
search your library for a workshop.
And the thing that's so funny about this is that very rarely are you actually in it for the second ability, but you run this with something like Caracas, to where you can just blink it and redeploy it, and before you know it, you're having a Tabernacle, you're running Crucible of Worlds, you're able to keep wastelanding them, and you're playing Smokestack, and you're doing what else you need to do, and the card is just obnoxious. And it has just a big old butt. When you look at that, where's the big butt on that thing? Is it hiding it? Where are you
is
butt
it
at?
the largest scout that's ever been printed?
I don't know, but I want to know where that at. Where is it?
Hey, where the booty at? Where the booty?
Usually scouts are not quite that big.
That's true.
I'm used to my scouts being Goblin Guide sized at the largest. Maybe 3/3. I think that there's like the one that searches your library for a snow land, and that's like about as big. 3/5, you should be a soldier. Like, you went into the wrong career.
This was a card that, and when the light came on when someone says this is a mini Primeval Titan, I was like, oh my god. Except this Primeval Titan has an awesome activated ability.
And also doesn't mean you have to play green mana.
It's true. Aaron, what's number 3? Uh-oh.
I love my number 3. My number 3 makes me so happy. I'll never forget where I was when I found out that they took my sweet prince from me. My number 3 is Golgari Grave Troll.
It had to be.
So Golgari Grave Troll is 4 colorless and a green. It was originally printed in Ravnica, City of Guilds. It is a creature type skeleton troll with 0 power, 0 toughness. It comes into play with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature card in your graveyard. 1 colorless. You can remove one of those counters to regenerate it. And that's about it. Let's go on to our number 2.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's what the card does, right?
That's exactly what the card does.
And it also has Dredge 6 on it. And so this is the card. It's banned in Modern. After it was brought back. It was banned the first time. They decided that it was safe, and then it lasted like 6 months to a year. And then they immediately rebanned it. It is legal in Legacy. It is restricted in Vintage. It was restricted last year due to Force of Vigor coming out, because they realized if you gave us this and Force of Vigor, Dredge would be unstoppable. And this is just my baby. You know, this is just the card that really powers you out. This is the nitrous in your tank, if you will. You know, Dredge can survive without it, as we've seen in 2 formats. You know, you don't need this card, but when you have it, you're just going at such an incredible speed that it's just, and it is relevant. I have cast Grave Trolls before. You know, it is a great way to get past Grafdigger's Cage. You just hard cast a Grave Troll. You can Dread Return a Grave Troll as well, and just have a really big beater, a big body.
I really like just Revelarking a Grave Troll.
Oh,
Never had the chance to do that. That's
really
nice
good.
one.
Yeah, it's my baby.
That's ridiculous. What's really interesting to me is that they changed it. They literally errated Golgari Grave Troll. They printed it technically 3 times if you want to count Magic Online theme decks, but between Ravnica and Dual Decks, the Ultimate Masters version, it originally began as a skeleton troll. Again, a skeleton troll, but now a troll skeleton. Swapped around on you.
Okay, yeah. Why was that necessitated?
I don't know. I guess tribal stuff, class versus...
Except for that, it's neither of those are jobs.
I agree with you.
What do you do for a living? I'm a skeleton.
I troll. I don't know.
Well, I guess that could be.
It could be. It's fine.
To be fair, if you're under a bridge asking for a toll, that is technically your job, that you're a troll.
Right. Okay. Well, either way, my number 3 is a card that we have talked around a little bit. A card that we've brought up in many lists so far. You can't really kind of get away from it, quite frankly, because it was a metric bomb of a creature at the time. It was better than everything else. And not only was it better than everything else, Wizards gave you the most obnoxious combo ever with a Restoration Angel and Thragtusk. Thragtusk is my number 3. It's a green and 4 generic mana for a 5/3 rare beast. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life, and when it leaves the battlefield, that means just leave, whether it bounces back to your hand, or it exiles and comes back. When it leaves the battlefield, you create a 3/3 beast creature token. It's just hot, sweet value, coming and going.
And this was a direct answer to what was happening in the metagame at the time. You know, we were dealing with these standard Delver decks that were running, you know, Delver, maybe Geist of Saint Traff, you were running Vapor Snag, you know, just these very tempo annoying decks that had really cheap, efficient ways to bounce your creatures. And so this is where you're going, okay, I'm really okay if you Vapor Snag this. Yeah. You know, because you're going to get the value out of it. Or, you know, this is a really big power, really big toughness that you can throw in front of Geist and will survive a Geist. You know, this was a direct answer to the metagame that ended up just exploding into a useful card even after that deck that it was meant to fight was gone. Continues to see play in older formats going all the way up to Legacy. Legacy Nick Fit loves this card. You see it in Tron sometimes when Tron needs to play more of a fair game. There's a red-green standard deck a red-green mid-range deck that is doing quite well in Modern right now, that runs Clothis, you know, and Mages to the Moon, and then you run this, and it's just meant to keep you nice and cushy.
Yeah, this is like when you bring in the toads to solve the insect problem, and then your farm is overrun with toads.
Yes.
Well, guess what? That's Thragtusk.
Yeah.
Is that it outlived the problem that it was meant to solve, and now, well, guess what? Nothing but beast tokens as far as the eye can see.
It was everywhere. And at one point, I had lost a win-in at an SCG Open because I was playing, I believe it was black-green at the time. I was playing black-green rock, essentially, for all intents and purposes. And my last round, my win-in was against mono-red. And hey, what's great against mono-red? Am I right or am I right? And I get in a situation where I say, okay, the only way out of this is if I rip a Thragtusk, right? Yep. You think, okay, fine. Do this, okay, block with whatever, okay, go. Draw Thragtusk. Oh my god, I had blocked with my Llanowar Elves and I died with 4 mana.
No!
That's exactly, and like, you know, it, like when it goes through your head, but you do the thing anyway because you're trying to not take so much damage. Yep, man, Thragtusk, baby, let me tell you. Moving to number 2, Aaron, what is your number 2?
My number 2 is the only higher on my list.
Well, goodness gracious. Wow. Tell you, take all the way to number 2. Ruben, what's your number 2?
My number 2, in all of the cards that have been banned, this was the first 5-drop banned in any format. It has since been re-legalized in said format, but it was a very strong card for a very long time. It's sort of been usurped in where it used to be great, but it'll pop up every once in a while, and it's always scary when somebody puts a Dream Halls onto the battlefield. Dream Halls only ever printed in Stronghold.
Part of the reserve list.
Part of the reserve list. It is in, of course, Tempest Remastered, as part of Tempest Block, is 3 colorless blue for an enchantment. Rather than pay, I don't like that sentence, rather than pay the mana cost for a spell, its controller may discard a card that shares a color with that spell. This was, of course, a big part of the early Dream Halls decks back in the day, were just drawing a bunch of cards, things like Meditate, it was mono blue kind of things. Then, of course, you get to Omni Show, and you can, use your confluxes to cast Progenitises and vice versa. Bunch of stuff like that. Or you can just show and tell something into play to be able to cast a Gristlebrand, draw a million. Then, of course, you have the Enter the Infinite combo, which draws your entire deck. And lets you play an Omniscience after you play your Dream Halls. There's a bunch of cool things you can do with the Dream Halls.
This card, I believe it was, maybe it was V, Mauschwitz.
Yeah, it was V.
Who was just like, what are you doing making this card? It's insane. And immediately brewed up the deck. The deck was beyond busted. This card is just stupid. And the fact that you don't even have to exile the cards, you discard them, which puts it in a fantastic zone that has been known to do all sorts of craziness. And that's kind of where you went from there. Dream Halls is just busted. It's on the reserve list. We're not going to see a reprint. This is a card that they're not like rushing to put in Magic Arena or nothing. No. This card can stay away for a while. It's okay. This card's busted. Jesus. Aaron. Myself, for my number 2 here, is, again, a format-defining card. This card, from the instant it saw print, saw infinite play, more or less built its own archetypes, has been a huge force, and not just when it was in Standard, but Pioneer. It was crushing around in Modern. It was doing some great stuff in Historic. I just played against it just the other day. They are going to make a new version of this Planeswalker, as I expected to, at least in Core 2021, because they say it's all about Teferi. And Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, is a 5-mana Planeswalker. But we all know it's a 3-mana Planeswalker.
Yeah.
But it's okay. You had to pay full price for it to start with, then you got the rebate. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, is a blue, white, and 3 generic mana for a 4 loyalty mythic legendary Planeswalker Teferi. It has +1 draw card at the beginning of the next end step, untap 2 lands. -3, put target non-land permanent into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. And -8, you get an emblem with, quote, whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent an opponent controls.
It's so obnoxious.
I knew that we had a problem here when it won a vintage challenge, because 5-mana Planeswalkers rarely, I mean, Jace maybe, but even
4.
And that's 4.
It's 4. And even then you're running maybe 1 or 2. But, when Teferi was good enough to win a vintage challenge, when we started seeing it in Legacy, when it started getting slotted into the Miracles decks, when you were seeing this multi-format dominance of, Standard, Modern, Legacy, Vintage, in a relatively short time frame, I knew that we had a problem here. And no card has really infuriated people, to the degree that this card has. I don't know anybody who was sad to see this go. But then, that was a little bit tempered when we realized that we then had baby Teferi to deal with. And so, Wizards has shown no hesitation at making Teferis good. And we also have another Teferi coming in on the horizon, and people are like, oh no, they're just kind of bracing themselves for the nonsense.
Yeah. That's definitely going to be good, because the whole set now is about Teferi. So if it wasn't all about Teferi before and they were good, boy howdy, let me tell you what happens when the whole, you're the title song of the album.
Yeah.
5-mana Teferi, good in control, good in combo, alongside of Nexus of Fate, particularly alongside Root Snare, back when the Nexus of Fate Turbo Fog deck was really just all over the place. And as you mentioned, Jace the Mind Sculptor was once better than all, but then people just didn't play it in Modern in lieu of Teferi, which cost more, cost a different color of mana,
Right.
Like,
Cost more, but not really. And gave you that sweet
required
rebate.
more lands in play.
Yes, required more mana to operate, because you have to recall that there was a time period where Teferi rotated out from, Dominaria rotated out of Standard, and we're all like, okay, cool. And we're like, we're in Ravnica. Ravnica's fun. Ravnica's sweet. And it's like, oops, War of the Spark, T3 Fairy, enjoy yourself being under this guy's thumb for the next year and a half.
What's up, cats and kittens? It's me, your boy.
That's right. It's your boy. And we'll see what happens in Core 2021.
Back to mess with the stack some more.
Tell you what, we want here to number 1. Aaron, what's your number 1?
My number 1 is a card that is so good. It is banned in one format, restricted in another, and has had so much ink written about it that there's a literal book written about it. How many cards can say that? With multiple editions, I believe. I am a recent convert to this card. Being a blue card, it's not really in my repertoire. But I did a stream the other day where I was playing Jeskai Breach in Vintage, and let me tell you, I never thought I would have so much fun gushing in my entire life. I gushed in front of people. I gushed all night long.
This is a family show. Oh my God.
If you haven't gushed, you should gush. It's amazing.
It is a good time.
It is a good time. So Gush was originally printed in Mercadian Masks. It is 4 colorless and a blue. It's an instant. You can return 2 islands you control to their owner's hand instead of paying Gush's mana cost, and you draw 2 cards. Stephen Menendian famously wrote the book on Gush. Literally, he gave it to me as a gift. I have it in my bookcase. And this is just an amazing card. You're oftentimes floating the 2 blue mana. There are a lot of things in Vintage that cost 2 or less, so you're able to, probably cast whatever it is that you gushed for. You can also gush for a Force of Will, just whatever you need to do if you're trying to keep your Monastery Mentor train going. This is just an incredibly powerful card that just makes the blue decks in Vintage. If I understand the format correctly, it has come on and off the restricted list where it was and it wasn't. Banned in Pauper, I believe, as well.
It's more often on again, off again than a relationship on the hit show Friends.
Yeah.
Tell you what.
Gush is also the key way I've found in my time playing Vintage to make Library of Alexandria work. Like at some point you are going to get down below 7 cards. Gush not only draws you 2 cards, it returns those lands to your hands to be able to get you back to library going.
I think the 3 scariest words in Magic the Gathering is rather than pay.
Yeah.
It's just, it does so much. It leads to so many unfair, unstoppable, weird situations. It gets around the entire economy of the game. Yeah. Rather than pay what we told you needed to pay, go do something else to get around it. And how many times has that just blown up in their face over and over and over again? It's ridiculous. Gush is awesome, and I did gush myself to death at the Invitational when I was playing Vintage, and I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. And that was the thing. Banned
in Legacy and Pauper, because it is a common for some reason.
It's a common.
And restricted in Vintage,
Ridiculous. Ruben, what's your number 1?
My number 1, which I can only assume is Aaron's number 2.
Or my number 1.
You know what I like.
It could be Evan's number 1, but I know what Aaron likes. I mean, I could be... You know what? I'm going to back off that. I'm just going to say that there's never been a card emergency banned, except for Memory Jar.
Gosh.
It's Memory Jar. Memory Jar is my number 1 5-mana card.
It was my number 2, yes.
Okay. I mean, what do I got to do? Memory Jar, 5 colorless for an artifact. Part of the reserved list, originally from my favorite set, Urza's Legacy. It is a rare. Tap, sacrifice Memory Jar. Each player exiles all cards from their hand face down and draws 7 cards. At the beginning of the next end step, each player discards their hand and returns to their hand each card they exiled in this way. Of course, this is on the emergency banned list thanks to Megrim Jar, which was a sort of last-minute creation of Randy Bueller and Eric Lauer. Listen to this deck. 16 lands. I won't get into the lands. 4 Brainstorm, 4 Dark Ritual, a Mystical Tutor, 4 Tinker, 4 Vamp Tutor, 2 Yogg Will, 4 Defense Grid, 4 Lion's Eye Diamond, Be Still My Heart, 4 Lotus Petal, 4 Mana Vault, a Megrim, 4 Jar, and 4 Mox Diamond. That is like that deck is all of it is banned now. Like every
It's-
card.
Almost all of it is completely banned up one side and down the other. Memory Jar, another one of those cards that Zvi Mauschwitz lost his mind over and busted it almost immediately. This card, it's hard to describe how insanely busted this card really is. It's draw 7, it's make them discard 7, which is where the Megrim came in, and it's just 5 mana, and just tap whenever you want to do it, and they would let you just run 4 of this or whatever, and go completely nuts. I've played around with that deck originally, and it is a ton of fun.
I remember the first time I ever cracked a Memory Jar in Vintage. I think I was playing... honestly, I think I was playing 2-card Monty. Like, I think it was just a 1 card in there because, you know, this downside, if you will, isn't really a downside if you can just win the game. And so, you know, I remember, you know, playing Dredge, so many cards just don't matter to you, quite honestly, where you're like, you know, so I had seen Memory Jar around, but I'd never really seen it in action. And then the first time, like, someone cracked it, I didn't really know what it meant for me as a Dredge player. And I was like, I just kind of smiled and nodded where it's like, okay, that's fine. But when I was on like the good side of the Memory Jar, oh my God, it was definitely like an achievement. It was a life moment of just like, oh my goodness.
It's a hug from Jesus.
The hug from Jesus is just an incredible card. Like if you ever have the chance to crack a Memory Jar, take it because you will feel so alive.
I also really like, first of all, you can cheat it into play. You can go tinker for it. But it is like, you do cast it. Like, you cast it for 5 mana. And a lot of the times, especially in Cube, I'll just be like, Memory Jar. Go. Like, here's a time bomb, I guess.
Yeah. Right. Thing you can do to get a hand.
Yeah, especially in cubes in which Storm is prevalent. I love Memory Jar.
It's in all the Storm cubes, and of which there are fun times to be had. Well, my number one is, it's a weapon. You know, it's a very cool, interesting card. You could argue, I think you could argue, this would be the number 1 casual card of all time. Whether it was stumbled into or expected or not. Whether the fact that Wizards make sure to put this in sets they want to make sure are going to do well. They put it on a Judge promo. They tell you, hey, Battle Bond is all about that multiplayer life. Okay, cool. Here's this sick mythic. They say, hey, Double Masters is coming, and we're going to make really cool extended art versions for our box toppers. And one of the mythics we want to show off doing that is Doubling Season. Doubling Season is a $50 card. No matter how you slice it, it just won't go down. They just keep reprinting it. Doubling Season is a green and 4 generic mana. A mythic used to be rare because there weren't mythics back then in Ravnica City of Guilds. It is an enchantment that says if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. If an effect would put 1 or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many counters on that permanent instead. A bunch of scary things that you can never, like, you can't put this back in standard because Planeswalkers break it. This was before Planeswalkers because the word permanent is a problem. I would also note that I would expect there one day to be a tripling season.
Oh, God.
I do expect it one day. Probably gonna cost another couple green, so 3 green and 4, but triple your season, you get 3 of everything. Why? Because it would be an absolute casual all-star. And people would be excited about it, just like they're excited about Double Masters having Doubling Season. Yeah. Which is thematically good anyway. So
this is one of those cards that allows you to determine the intentions of the people you're playing with, particularly in Commander, where, you know, a lot of times in Commander, you'll kind of you'll have that talk of like, what's everybody running? How powerful are you? And you get that one person that's like, oh, you know, I'm just here to have a good time. I'm running like a Mara, like it's fine. And then they play like a Doubling Season. It's like, you lying. Because no one just casually plays Doubling Season. You are in it to do ridiculous things. And so anytime you see that, you know, that's an immediate target on your head, you know nothing good is coming down the pike. And you just have to deal with it immediately. Big fan, it's usually a big hit in Atraxa decks, any sort of super friend decks, because it can just win the game on the spot. Right.
It obviously goes infinite with Jace Cunning Castaway amongst its best Planeswalker pals. There's probably 24 Planeswalkers that allow you to go immediately infinite because Doubling Season existed in a world before Planeswalkers. Not to mention the fact that you can also play Spike Feeder. You can also play cards that are supposed to just, have 1-to-1 ratios of +1/+1 counters, and then doubling them. Hardened Scales is a competitive deck, and it does 1/10 of what Doubling Season does.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, this card is dope. And, one day, maybe Tripling Season will be upon us. We shall see.
Man, they did print Nyxborn Ancient, which is Nyxbloom Ancient.
We never thought we'd see that.
Which is an absurd thing to read on a Magic card. So when Doubling Season or Tripling Season arrives,
don't tell them I didn't warn you.
I'll tell. Yep. You know what? Evan Irwin called it.
That's all I'm saying. That was our top 10 5 CMC spells. You will see them on the screen now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10. And we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite, win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for having us. This is our 5-year anniversary.
Exactly. That's right. This is all celebrating the 5 CMC was for the 5-year anniversary. We've been together for half a decade now, making these. The top 10s we've only been doing for
about 3-ish years.
Yeah. So we'll have to look into what to do for the celebration of 5 years of this show later. But
still,
thank you for everybody who's joined us recently, who was there at the beginning. For people who've fallen away, but anyone who's supported us through the entire process, it's been great.
You guys are awesome, and we certainly
high five.
Wow.
Because the show is
right. Because the show. All right, it's the 5th. All right, let's move on here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-host, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching or listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online on Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at MagicMikesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at MagicMikesPodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes or Spotify. We're just doing this here next week. Same time, same place for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.